this fun flamingo. And of course, as I always like to say, we are not a fine art group, we are a fun art group. So, we try to make all these awesome designs as accessible as we can. So for today, what you will be needing is anything to draw with. If you don't have paint today, that's quite all right. Just grab your pencils and crayons. And we have this sketch pad paper. So we have worked on canvas, but I'm going to paint on some paper today. So you're going to need a pink color. You're going to need a green shade, a white shade, and a black shade. One of the more simpler designs that we've done here. And of course, a pencil to work with. If you are painting, you do need a nice cup of water and some paints. Need a paintbrush. So we have a 1-inch flat brush. We have a medium-sized 1/4-inch flat brush and a thinner liner brush to do the details. And then of course you want to have close by some napkins to help with cleanup. So with our picture, we are going to get started doing our main little focus here, which is our flamingo. Then we'll move on to the background details like the flowers and the leaves. And then of course, we're going to shade everything in black. So we're kind of going to go backwards in terms of color use. We're going to try to do the lighter colors first and then go into the black background. So what we want to do first with this style picture is we want to kind of use some dots to gauge how large of the page we want to then create our flamingo. So the flamingo comes down about a little bit less than halfway, and I'm going to place a dot here about 3 or 4 fingers to the right, and that's where the top of the neckline will stop. And then I'm going to come down to about 1 inch off the bottom of the page and place another dot. And then in this space is where we're going to create our bird. So just to bring it up a little bit closer, we have a dot here, and it's about a handful down from the top and about a little bit inch off and about 3 inches in for the bottom. That's where our foot is going to end. And then next, we're going to then go ahead and come down to about the middle and place another dot to see how wide I'm going to do my bird. The bird isn't going to go more than halfway around our picture, and then about 1 inch off, half an inch off the edge of the page. So we have our dots. We're going to be working in this general area. This is just a guideline so that when we're drawing, we're not drawing too big of a bird and covering up all the background space, because we do want to leave some room to add the design in the background. Okay, so to start off with, we're going to create some short strokes at this top line, and I'm going to curve it off about 1 inch and then create another parallel line and then draw a circle. So I have a circle here. That's going to be where my bird head shape is. I'm going to bring it down just a little more. Again, just a simple little circle about the size of a quarter. Coming down and just now attaching that curved line to my bird, and then just creating a little bit of a curved line to do a beak. So that is the first step. Then we're going to kind of come around and create a question mark shape. So it's almost like we've curved around from that bottom parallel line and went as far out as this dot was here. And now I'm just going to short strokes follow this line around like so. So I have the curve coming from the top, then creating a smaller parallel curve into a round shape. Then we're going to kind of go backwards and create question mark shape. So we came around, created the question mark, and then just used a parallel line to follow that neckline. And we stop right about where that dot came on the left side. And now I'm going to bring the body forward with a little bit more of a curved line and then move my way across. So it has that flamingo swan-like style body. We've curved all the way around with some short lines. And now I'm going to come back up and create the roundness of the body here. And of course, if you don't like the angle in which you've done the neckline, you can always come back and change it. I'm just going to adjust the thickness of the neckline here. Again, with some short strokes. Just like so. So you come around and now you have your body. And then the feet are very straightforward. If you can draw a number 4, you just come straight down and draw number 4. And that was the legs. So now that we've had the shape of our bird laid out for us, we have this curve towards the front. The rounded body doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a guideline. And now we'll move into our design details. So this is our sample bird. We have here that question mark shaped line, and then the neck kind of comes down into the body and then curves back around. And then of course, a number 4 for our legs. So behind this lovely flamingo, I'm going to put a dot at the bottom of the base of where the head is. So I place a dot here. That is my point of my tropical leaf. And I'm going to use that as a guide to now then draw this leaf kind of coming behind the flamingo like so. So here we are with this point, and we're going to move it out and off the page, just like so. So you want to skip over the flamingo. You don't want to draw a line through the flamingo. You want to pretend that the line is continuing behind the flamingo and coming out this other side and then moving itself down further. I'm going to put another dot to signify the eye for the flamingo here. And then right parallel to that, I'm going to start my next leaf. So we have the eye here, and the starting point for the next leaf is going to be right across the way. So with a rounded curved edge, I'm going to start shaping my leaf with some short strokes, and then literally have the rest of it shaped off the paper. So the starting point is a little rounded and then moves its way completely off the page. And then right above this neckline, I'm going to place another dot, and that will be where the next leaf takes off and curves off the page, just like so. And then we'll go ahead and include our flowers. So to start off our flowers, if you can draw a circle, you're going to create the circle where you want the flower to go. So this is going to be the center of the flower. It's going to start the guide of how you have your placement. So pick a good place where you want your flower to be. And I'm actually going to scooch it over just a hair. I want to have more space for my petals. So I'm just going to scooch it over a little bit. So that's our starting point, this smaller circle. Now with this smaller circle, I'm going to then draw some U's. I'm going to have 5 U's that come off this petal. So it almost looks like a daisy, but the lines aren't technically touching. So I'm creating 5 upside down U's just like so. And then once you have the smaller U's, you can then with some short strokes create the larger one. So once you have that smaller one, you can start creating a larger. Now don't worry if your lines are crossing once we paint. These guidelines will then be adjusted. So this is just the sketch so that we know how big to make our petals. And some short strokes get us this final flower. And then you want to then draw kind of a pointed line going off the end. That would be our stamen shape. So I've gone around, started with the circle, and then went around and created 5 letter U's. And then with that same shape in mind, created a larger petal going around and coming back. And that's creating our tropical flower like so. And then after that, I added the length of the stamen just to remind myself that after I'm done, I want a pink line here. And we're going to repeat the same design concept here at the bottom. So I'm going to decide I want my flower to fill this whole space. So at the center of that, I'm going to draw a small circle. And then once I've sketched the circle, I'm going to create 5 smaller letter U's. And then I'm going to elongate the sides of those U's to create my petal, just like so. And again, I'm using short strokes. I'm not pressing hard with my pencil at all. I'm just creating guidelines. This is not coloring in the lines once you place the paint. This is just more so you learning the space and what looks good. And when you've decided what looks good in your space, then you can make it permanent with paint. And that's how you kind of want to treat these sketch lines, as just guidelines. So we have our bottom flower created and a little stamen coming out to the side. So that's what I have for my sketch. It looked a little difficult, but it is resemblant of our inspiration here. And we have our hibiscus flower here and here. We have our 3 leaves. If you want to add more leaves and get creative with it, just fine. Also, if you want to change the color of your background, what's popular is a light blue color to represent like a sky or tropical sky design. And for the purposes of this picture, I'm going to stick with the pink, the green, and the black background. And the way that I'm going to get started, I'm going to start with our medium-sized brush. I'm going to get a paper towel close by and just blot off some extra, let me use a piece of paper, blot off some extra of the moisture on the brush. And I'm going to get started with our lighter color, which is the pink. So I have this kind of magenta pink. And this magenta version of pink that I have is a little more opaque. So it's going to need 2 coats. And I'm going to go on to my Flamingo and start using my brush to now fill in my sketch. And I'm going to use the thickness of the brush to kind of determine the thickness of my bird's neck. And I'm just curving along using the line as a guideline. I'm not trying to color in the lines. I'm just using it like as a starting point. It's okay to color outside the lines with this style of painting. So I'm just going ahead and filling in with the pink my flamingo shape. And this is going to be the first kind of coat. And then with the body, once I follow the curve of the neck, with the body, I'm going to just drape the color in one big curve across the whole body. And this will just give the simulation that the feathers are moving in the same kind of direction. So we just curve around the front and pull across the whole of the body. Just like so. Now all the parts of the flamingo, including the beak, are very pink. So I'm going to stand my brush perpendicular to the paper and then just let the edge kind of fill in that thin beak as well. Just like that. And again, standing my brush perpendicular, I'm just going to go across the line right over that number 4 that we drew and give my flamingo some legs to stand on. Just like so. Now, since this flamingo is going to need a second coat, I'm going to go on to the next pink area, which is going to be the flower. And the only thing that I'm filling in is that larger petal. So go ahead and take your time. I moved the edge of the brush to kind of press and put pressure as it curves and then pull it down. So I have light pressure, then I push it down a little more and allow the brush to curve, and then I pull the brush up. And that curved petal comes out very smoothly. And then any other areas, I'm just cleaning up by softly pulling the bristles across. And I'm trying not to leave any big puddles or streaks of paint. I try to smooth out all the streaks. My flamingo has streaks here. Just going to kind of softly pull it across so it can dry faster, number 1, and it's so it doesn't leave a thick design line. And for the next petal, again, I'm loading my brush, kind of medium load here of the paint towards the end, and I slightly press, then I foot pull, slightly press, pull with full pressure, and then slightly press again. So I let the brush kind of come up and softly press, give it full pressure as I curve, and then pull the brush up. Slightly press, more pressure, pull up, and that kind of gives you that curve that you need to fill in for the petal. It's a slight touch with the smaller, thinner part and a pressure curve for the petal. Moving on to the next one. Again, that's the only thing that I'm filling in. That little extra circle that we drew, I'm not filling in. I'm going to leave it white for now, and then when we put in our background, it will become a black color. So right now I'm just concentrating on filling in my petals and making them look as smooth and curved as possible, and buffing out any extra layers or lines of paint. And again, standing the brush perpendicular, softly pressing and then pushing down with more pressure as I turn, and then softly coming up again, doing the same thing around the smaller edge, pulling in some more paint, and now just kind of doing a swoosh across for the stamen. I just kept my paintbrush perpendicular and just pulled a line out to the side. And then we have the last petal up here. And then we'll move down to the next flower towards the bottom. The next flower towards the bottom will get the same treatment. Trying to fill it in as much as you can. And as I paint these flowers, my thoughts are with the people of Maui and sending them my positive thoughts and prayers for what they're going through. Just a little bit of tropical, positivity their way. And we'll go into the next leaf at, excuse me, petal at the bottom. Filling in with a feather light touch in the beginning and a full pressure curve. Just like so. And again, don't think that you need to use paint to create this picture. If you have anything, if you just want to try to sketch it your best, if you want to use color pencils, if you like markers, this design really blends and lends itself well to all different kinds of mediums. Don't think that if you want to take some time for yourself, you have to have expensive stuff too. They have great options that are affordable that can get you creating right away. Places like the dollar store and Five Below are great places to get supplies if you're looking to relax and start something new. So again, we're just coming in with this magenta color, continuing, keeping our brush perpendicular when the line is a little thinner, and giving the brush a little more pressure as we curve and follow the rounded guidelines for our petals. And then last but not least, I'm going to have the stamen kind of curving off that way towards the bottom. So that first level of design is definitely done. This is our inspiration that we got going on. This is my flower. This is my flamingo. And my flamingo is looking a little pale. So we're going to go ahead and wait for this paint to kind of dry and then throw another coat on just to give it a real deep and saturated color, especially in the neckline area. So I'm just following the neckline with my brush, not doing too many little strokes, just trying to move slowly and put a little bit of pressure so that my brush is kind of bending in half. And that's what's creating the thickness of the neckline. And following the curve and roundedness of the front belly, and then kind of pulling it across, again, the body to mimic the feathers. So I think once I do the head over, that pink should be good. And I'm going to clean my medium-sized brush because we're going to use it now for our leaves. And our leaves are quite easy. I'm going to start with the leaves that are not by the flamingo. I'm going to give this a little bit of a chance to dry first. So we're going to start at the top left with some Kelly green. You can mix the Kelly green with a little yellow. You can mix the Kelly green with a little blue to give it a more tropical hue. I'm staying with this Kelly green to kind of give it a deep green jungly color. And I'm not creating any indentations like you see here just yet. When I place my background color on, I'm going to then create the indents. So just worry about creating a smooth line for the edge of your leaf. And I'm going the whole length of the page in full pressure stroke. So I'm going full pressure, putting a lot of paint on the forefront of my brush like so. And then with just long strokes, I am pulling the color completely across. And again, if I see any overlapping or any kind of layers building up, I softly use the pressure to kind of sweep and buff out any kind of overlapping thick lines. And now moving down to our next leaf, I'm going to leave this part a little more rounded instead of pointed. And that's going to signify that that's like the bottom of our leaf. But it's a little more rounded and open. And then have it kind of float off the page, just like so. And then as I'm doing the petal, the leaves, I'm putting full pressure again on my brush and just standing the brush perpendicular so that I'm going as close to the guidelines to create a nice clean line for the edge. But then as I move towards the center, I'm pressing the brush with full pressure and trying to move in the same direction of the leaf, which is going kind of towards off the page and the bottom right direction. Full pressure and kind of buffing out any overlapping lines. Again, loading my brush, keeping the top half really full, and kind of using full pressure to pull the color completely across. Just like so. Just kind of cleaning up the edge, but now just coming back in and buffing out any of the overlapping edges that are created. Just like so. Okay. So now it can be a little bit of the tricky part. So I'm going to leave this brush still with the green on it, but I'm going to use my liner brush to kind of help me with the details that are kind of behind this flamingo here. So the starting point of this leaf that's here is just below the face of my flamingo. So I'm going to use my liner brush just to get into that smaller area. Small area, smaller brush is a good way to think about it. Big area, bigger brush. So I'm just going to use this liner brush to kind of get in that little corner that lurks behind the flamingo. And then again, this area that's a little bit smaller towards the bottom. I have the leaf tucked behind the legs here. So I'm just going to use that liner brush to really get into those smaller places. And I'm softly putting pressure. I'm not pressing hard at all. I'm really letting the tip of the brush do the work while I'm filling and coloring in my guideline. And then again, I'm going to go in between the legs here because my leaf does go behind this flamingo. And I really like the contrast between the green and the pink too. So you're more than welcome to keep the background behind the flamingo black or a blue. But I just really love the way that the green pops off of this pink shade. And then of course, if you didn't already know, you can create any kind of color flamingo you want. And of course, red and white make a pink. So if you don't have the color pink right offhand, feel free to get creative. Mix some red and white and you'll be good to go. So I'm just kind of outlining the legs at this point because that's a smaller detail that I want to get correct. And I'm just going to outline the bottom as well. And then once those areas are outlined, I'm going to jump back into using my medium-sized brush so that I can fill in the larger space. And again, I'm going towards the direction that is off the page. Just like so. And then I'm just filling in and pulling with long strokes. And then buffing out any overlapping line. And pulling off with full pressure. And just filling out just like so. Anywhere that it's shiny, I know there's additional paint. So I try to softly sweep over it and kind of buff it out. When you see that there's another level of paint in there, it takes a little longer to dry. So I want the piece to dry fairly quickly. And the best way to do that is to just softly sweep and go over any of the shining areas. So just a little zoom in on what we have accomplished. We kind of went through all the details with a smaller brush around the legs. And then we got our other leaves pretty much ready to rock. So the next steps is tricky because we will be working with black. So if you're scared to work with black again, I recommend you can use a light blue. And if you want to add a little green to it, it'll give you a nice turquoise, which is very tropical. And with this background, I want you to remember that black is not as forgiving as color. So you want to focus on putting on all the color first, and then start with the little details on the insides of the flowers first, and then going around, just like we outlined the legs, kind of going around the edges and lining those first before using the medium-sized brush or our larger inch brush to then fill in the larger areas of the background. So let me show you a little bit what I mean. So I'm going to use my liner brush. I'm going to start with a little bit of black. This black has a good consistency, but if your black is a little thicker, you can always add a little water to it to make it more pliable. That means just dip your brush into the water cup. And then I start twisting my brush on its side just to coax it into kind of like a point, which makes it easier to maneuver these smaller detailed areas. So now I'm just going to come in and again slowly go over the guideline that we drew earlier, so that I'm kind of outlining over again in the black and moving as slowly as possible. This does not have to be a fast process. This isn't a race. You're not a race against time. You can really take your time. And because black is so not forgiving, you want to move slowly with this process. That way you don't have what you might see as something that's not appealing design-wise. And to cover up the black is a little more difficult. Once it dries, you can try to paint over it, but generally black is just not a forgiving shade to paint over. So I'm just working slowly, starting with the inside guideline that we drew earlier. And then now I'm just bringing that whole shade to the center. And then I'm going to then outline the outside of our flower. So I'm going to start literally just retracing the outside line of my flower and just moving softly and slowly, twisting in the black color so I can coax my brush into a point. And if you have pencils or crayons, a great way to outline if you want to use mixed media is a black ballpoint pen, or if you have a black Sharpie. This outlining process goes by so much faster with those tools. So again, I'm just retracing my steps. I have my little stamen here, so I'm trying not to cover up the stamen too much. I'm just kind of softly pressing and letting the bristles kind of guide for me. And just going back around, letting the flower shape take hold. And now's a good time that if you made a weird wonky shape or it looks a little too large, now you can use the black to kind of trim your shape of your petal and make it look a little straighter and a little cleaner. So you can lay over the black and just really clean up any edges or any kind of imperfect kind of shape that might have been painted when you were just painting with the pink. So again, we're going to complete this same process of filling in the center with the next flower. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little water to my black just to make it more pliable. And I'm twisting the brush on its side just to coax it into a point. And now again, I'm retracing the first U we drew, just like so. Filling in the center. And really just cleaning up our petals with the harsher, more defined black outline. And the pressure that I'm putting on the brush is like minimal. Right now I'm leaning with my hand against the table, but if you're using an easel or you need stability, you can always just place your pinky so that you can kind of get a little more stabilization, because I know sometimes people get a little shaky when doing line work, and if you lean against something or use your pinky to lean against something, it gives you more stability to create a cleaner line. And then of course, like I said, if you have any kind of other mediums like a ballpoint pen or a Sharpie marker or a black color pencil, you can always come in and just clean up these lines with a darker color. Doesn't necessarily have to be black. When you're outlining and you have a blue background, you can always just outline with the blue. And I'm just going over the stamen length like so. Again, every time I go into the black, I'm just checking to see how pliable it is, and then I'm twisting the color on its side and just making it into a point just to make my life easier as I'm going through right here. And around again we go to the next flower. And around again one last time. Beautiful. So we have our flowers outlined, and then next we'll be adding some details to our flamingo. So our flamingo second coat should definitely be, for the most part, ready to rock. So if you still see it a little bit shiny, that just means there's color. So when you try to put a wet color on top, it does kind of tend to smear. So just make sure that your flamingo is as dry as it could be. I'm going to start with the feet, and I'm just tracing a little line to the left and then creating 3 little lines at the end to represent our little foot. They're so teeny tiny, you could barely see them, but they're there. Here's my little foot. So we have a little foot, a little dotted eye, and a little beak, and this fella really comes to life. Just like that. And our little beak. I'm just going across and rounding out his little circly head. I'm calling it a he because that's what my imagination says it is. Just like so. And then around and around we go. So I'm going to start coming around slowly. And when I'm creating the line, I'm trying not to do the line in one quick move. I'm kind of moving in sections And I have this little tuft of feather kind of sticking up here, so I'm going to kind of keep that. I think it adds to the texture of the bird. Give it the bird of the feather, a feathery look. Okay. And now's the time that if you think you have a wonky looking shaped neck, the black really helps you fix that. So I would work my way in and slowly just keep adjusting until the neck looks smooth and proportional. Again, just coming in with a little outline of black there. And now I'm going to be moving the line backward. And then I stop. So once I stop at that edge, I'm going to create like a zigzaggy back and forth just to give it the illusion of a feather. And then a fuller line down here. And then I'm going to stop at the bottom of the feet and give it like two little wispies just to make it look like the feathers are kind of shaping around the legs. So you got, they look like little letter W's around the top of the feet. And then bringing that belly forth. So once I have that, I'm going to highlight with a little black as per our design. Highlight the chin with a little curvy black, and then really round off the feather with some rounded wisps, like so. And that has, it's a little shiny, but it gives that feathery effect. And then last but not least, the last bit of outlining that we're going to do before we get into our larger brush and getting into the background is, of course, we're going to outline the black of our tropical leaves. So I'm really just putting full pressure, leaving a nice harsh black line. I'm not dainty as I was for the other details. I'm just really trying to get a clean line for the leaf. And then in our, this is our inspiration, we have some black kind of cutting in to the shape. So we're going to use our detail brush. I'm going to add some water to my black again to create it and make it more pliable. And then I'm twisting it into a point. And then I'm literally just going to kind of create a nice soft line, almost in the shape of a long triangle, a very pointed, purposeful black line, and it's angled to go off of the leaf, just like so. And I'll be doing the same thing with this next leaf that I create a nice kind of harsh edged background, edge, and then in here again I'm going to angle some cuts for their leaf. And last but not least, the last corner petal, excuse me, leaf is getting his edge treatment. And then the next steps that we'll be working with, again, if it's a larger area, you want a larger brush. So we will be getting our larger brush, which is the 1-inch brush. And we will be coming in with the larger areas to kind of get that going as well. And then last but not least, we'll be highlighting with some details and some more pink. So big brush time. I got my inch brush ready to rock. Lots of black. It's a wet brush. And I'm going to try to keep the back as smooth as possible and go from the top to the bottom. So I'm really just trying to get in between these spaces. Almost standing the brush a little perpendicular. And just really getting that black color in there. And just moving around the flower. Trying my best not to kind of disturb any of the work that I've already done. Because that's why we went in with the smaller brush, so that when we went in with the larger brush, the detail work was already taken care of, and we can just use the larger brush to fill in the majority of the rest. Again, just kind of coming in, using the edges to my advantage, and then just softly pulling any color over. And then if I see any shininess or any layering in between, I'm just going to slightly put some pressure. I'm literally slightly sweeping, barely putting any pressure, and cleaning up any edges and really making that background kind of pop. Right. We are moving along nicely. So again, you're going to need some white and a little more pink for our details with our liner brush as soon as you finish with this black background. Okay. We are moving along quite nicely. I'm really loading as much paint as I can towards the tip of the brush, and then once I put the majority of the color down, I try to then smooth it across any areas. And just smooth it out. Now, generally around this neckline, I would probably try to use a smaller brush. So don't try this at home. I would definitely recommend to use a smaller brush for an area like that. I think I managed nicely with the larger brush. Just using the corner edge to kind of get in that smaller space and pull the color across. So if you have a smaller area, definitely recommend to use a smaller brush if you don't have super steady hands. But we attempted the impossible and succeeded. We used the big brush for the smaller area just now. Again, just filling in, smoothing out, cleaning up, making those colors really pop with this black background. And using the corners to kind of clean up here. Again, if your color is not that pliable, just dip your brush into a little bit of water, press it around, and it will make the color a little more pliable and easier to maneuver. And we're getting real close. I'm going to stand the brush up just to get into this smaller area towards the bottom. And so you guys might be wondering why we didn't just start doing the black background first. And the truth is, you could very well start with a black background first, but for time's sake, you would have to let it fully, completely dry. And then you would definitely need very pigmented pink to go over it. So if you did want to attempt to do a painting in an all black background, which they also sell black canvases too, but you can definitely paint an all black background and then make sure that it just thoroughly dries and that you have a good pigmented paint. You can also add gesso to a paint color to give it more pigment, and you can definitely put a bright color like this on top of black paint. But this still gets the job done. And again, we're getting into these smaller areas. I'm going to switch over to my medium-sized brush. So I'm going to clean the green off. My medium-sized brush. And I'm going to get into some black and then just more easily fill in this area. And then last but not least, we're going to do some highlighting with our liner brush. And believe it or not, the back of our paintbrush is going to help us with these details also. So there you are. Our background is looking pretty potent. Nice black shade going on. So let's make it really pop with a little bit of highlight, finishing touches. And of course, as every artist knows, it is not complete without your signature. So my signature, instead of a dark color today, I'll be picking white. Okay. So our black background is fully formed. We got a lot going on in terms of highlighting. And our best friend for highlighting is going to be this white. I have a nice thick white that we're using. And I'm just going to start off using a liner brush to start highlighting areas off the leaf. Coming in these edges here. And kind of almost outlining again some of the areas. I'm going to pick one side of the flower here to kind of curve off with the highlight, and I'm turning my brush on its side just like I did with the black paint to coax it into more of a point to make it easier for creating this little rounded highlight. Again, coaxing it into a point. Drawing some highlights on our leaves, like so. Coming in with some highlight on the tails. I'm just going to add a little white to this, make it more pliable. Here we go. That's a nice consistency. Just a drop of water from my cup gets it into a liner. I'm going to just do the other side of my flamingo leg. And 3 little wisps for my feet. We got some white highlight here and throughout the neckline. And just some wisps for our feathers. Again, picking one side for the flower to highlight, and it's going to be a rounded highlight like so. And then either side of the stamen is going to get some decorative dots as well as the petals. So the back of my brush is going to be filled with some white. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, just creating a triangle of dots on the actual petal, and then 3 above the stamen and 3 below the stamen, 3 above the stamen, 3 below the stamen, and of course throwing a little water dew dot magic here. Just like so. And just a little highlight on the tip for the last here. Down this way. And as I'm looking over things, I'm liking what I see. I'm looking at my inspiration. I'm going to throw a little more pink on our flowers. So I'm going to hop in just a touch more pink. 3 on top, 3 on the bottom, 3 on top, 3 on the bottom for my stamen, and then in the center, just groups of 3 for the pink in each little U area. And there we have it. Our inspiration is now a real thing. This is what we did. Our flamingo with our tropical. And last but not least, as you very well know, once you are finished with any picture, project, piece of art, and you know it's completely done, on the bottom right hand corner is where you will be told to put your artist name. Your artist name can be your initials, it can be your first and last name, or if you want to be like Prince, it could just be a sign. Whatever you want to do, just so long as you know your masterpiece is done. I'm going to go ahead and sign, and voila, our work of art is done.